I'm glad that so many of you were able to make it out today. This is definitely something that we've spent tons and tons of time putting together. In case we haven't met, because I think I've met most of you, I'm Jackson. I'm on the WeSprout team, and I've been doing UX work for the better part of the last decade, and I've run usability tests I went back and counted the other day, and for 75 different companies. So I've done a few of them on a bunch of different products, and so I've got some experience there. And then Ryan has been at Microsoft doing a lot of the same kinds of stuff for products that you're more likely to have heard of. So we're going to come at you from both of those angles, and we've sort of divided it up such that I'm sort of running the first half on the theory and the benefits and what you should be thinking about as you're doing the testing, and Ryan's going to talk about the methods and practices, but we're both going to interrupt each other on a regular basis and chime in with stuff. So yeah, user testing isn't really about testing your users, of course, though they often feel that way. So that's a really important part of going through the test, not thinking about it as and making sure that the user realizes that they're not being tested, but in fact you are being tested. So it's really about getting insights from real people, and of course, you are not real people. As much as you want to try to be real people, and you want to pretend to be real people, and you dress in real people clothes, the fact of the matter is that just by virtue of the fact that you have made the product that you're working on, and you know everything about it, every last detail, you are unlike everybody else who's going to interact with it, and therefore your opinions are opinions and are great, and everybody's got one, but they aren't the same as what your users are going to see, and they're going to see things from a different angle than you are. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the people. A lot of folks, when they think of user tests and when you talk to user testing agencies, they'll say, let's put together a 75-person study. It's going to take 3.5 months. You're going to get loads of feedback. For every person that you talk to, there's a bit of a law of diminishing returns involved. So most of the time, when you're an early stage product, you can have a good conversation, a good test with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and get 90% of what you would get from having those 75 people. Every additional person that you talk to is going to teach you slightly less than the person before. So we're not talking about tons and tons of people here, which is good because that takes a long time, often costs a lot of money, even if you're doing it yourself. And also, although for next week's session we're not really going to have a recruiting issue, recruiting can be a really big challenge. A lot of folks outsource the recruiting of their participants because scheduling is always a hassle. Getting them to actually come in when they've been scheduled is always a hassle. But in thinking about who you want to invite and who you want to recruit into your study, that can inform you a lot about who your users are and what your product really is, deciding that you want these types of people instead of those types of people, and so on. So the heart of any usability study and any usability research comes in the form of the tasks. And tasks are basically the things that you're asking your user to do in the process of going through the study. And they can be really broad or they can be very specific. And broad tasks separate the results from the process. That's sort of talking about the bigger picture and looking to see if your general product overview is going in the right direction. Whereas specific tasks really focus on individual designs that you've made and the way that you've gone about the various flows. Does clicking on this button really make sense? And in between those two, you can create tasks that are neither broad nor specific, and they really test nothing. They're really useless. So you really want to decide, am I going to go with some broad tasks here to look at our overall product, or am I going to really dive in and look specifically at particular pieces of the product and the execution? So just, for example, if we're thinking about kayak.com, a broad task might be, let's plan your late summer vacation. You have $5,000 tucked away in a Swiss bank account ready to go. Let's go. Do it. Right? And then you're going to see how people think through the process, what their considerations are. They're saying, well, I have a family of 3, so $5,000 is going to amount to this much per person. And then they'll start going through that whole process, and you can see their needs and how they work. And then they'll go through many other parts of the app so you can see those specific details. But that ends up being a broad task compared to you need to take a weekend trip to New York. Find the best deal that maximizes your time in New York but gets you back for your Monday 11 a.m. meeting. Oh, and get a window seat. In that sense, you're going to be testing their ability to find specific times, their ability to look and see which seats are available and to select the right one. You're going to be testing lots of small, nitty-gritty pieces of your app, and you're going to get feedback about those things, but you're not going to get much feedback about how they actually decide where they're going to go or how they decide which flights they're going to take, because you've sort of laid out those parameters for them.
A good bad example of this is done by IKEA did a study and said, find us, your favorite bookcase, right? That was the task. Find us your bookcase. And everyone went straight to the search bar and typed bookcases and such. And they realized that's not how normal people look for things. And so they rephrased the task to say, you have a lot of books and things you need to organize. Go about and do that. And then so people from there would go start exploring in the bedroom section, office section, then click on bookcases. Then basically rarely no one searched up bookcases. So you got to be careful. This task is what you're going to be asking people to do. So make sure you don't frame them in a way that you've designed the product. You need to let them.
Exactly. You want to make them realistic and ensure that your users. It's sort of like when you're negotiating with something or having an argument. You're more likely to win if they're coming up with your idea and they're you've put that seed in their head and they sort of develop it. So if they're saying, oh, I want to do this, then you're going to get some really great feedback and you're going to see how they're really able to use it. So make your tasks realistic insofar as you're able to. In some cases, you're going to have a very specific product and somebody's going to be thrown in front of you who's not necessarily a good recruit, in which case, it might not work out perfectly. But as much as you can, realism goes a long way. A lot of the big shops will, that when they're running these studies, let's say they're working on like a BestBuy.com or something like that, they'll give the participant a $100 Best Buy gift card to do their shopping and say, you'll keep what you get out of this. And in which case the person is saying, well, I better make this $100 count. So they're going to be thinking about the same things that they would if they had just gotten a gift card from a friend or something like that. So they're being put in a situation which is realistic, or at least creates a situation that's realistic enough to get some great feedback from. So sometimes if you really want to make stuff realistic, it might involve a little pre-search, a little pre-research on your participant, meaning that you sometimes might want to ask a few demographic questions. You almost always want to ask some demographic questions, but you might want to ask some questions that then inform the tasks that you're going to be asking them to do. So if you're asking them to, if you're asking about children and if you're asking parents about children, you may want to ask them how many they have so you can situate the task so that it's as realistic as possible for them. Sometimes you can do this in advance, in the phone screen that you might do prior to actually having them in person. In the case of next week, you might just want to ask them 4 or 5 questions straight off the bat when they come around to your table and, kind of go on the fly and wing it from there. Does that make sense? And then all of that means you probably need a prepared script. It sounds like an easy thing. Have somebody come over and just start using your product and give them 2 or 3 things to do. But then you can kind of sit there with a lot of radio silence going, well, that was interesting. And next we'll, what were we going to do next? Yeah, there we go. So spend a little bit of time before you test your product next Friday and prepare a script. And usually preparing a script takes, a couple of hours. Sometimes you might want to actually do some work on your product to polish up some flows so that your tasks will really work in the way that you intend for them to work. So it might take a little bit of more time to prep for that. But you'll want to say, here are the tasks that are involved. If somebody does this, then, ask them about X or Y. Figure out what all your data points are and script them out so that you have them in place. And that'll be hugely helpful when you go off on some interesting tangent and you want to bring it back around again, or if they sort of finish really quickly and you didn't expect them to get it quite so quickly.
And the script is important too because it kind of keeps it scientific in some way, right? So you're not introducing your product in 6 different ways to the person you're testing it with. Because at the end of each one, actually Jackson will get to, your report has to come together, and if you test every single person according to a script, you'll have better.
You can actually do something with it.
Do something with it.
Yeah. So during the testing process, one of the key things that you'll want to do as a moderator of this test is make sure that the participant is talking as much as humanly possible. You want them saying, well, I see this, when they land on a page, I see this, and I'm looking for this, and I'm going to give this one a try. I'm not really sure what it does, but I'm going to click on it, and oh yeah, that was right, or no, that wasn't what I wanted, I'm going back. The more of that inner dialogue you can pull out of them, the more instructive it's going to be for you when you find out that all of your users might have actually done the right thing, but they might have been unsure about whether or not this button was going to take them where they needed to go, in which case you might want to clarify that even though it did work out in your testing in the end. So it's your opportunity to really see your design through a real user's eyes, not a by definition power user like yourselves, but the people that you're going to interact with when you're actually out on the market and interacting with random folks that you've never met and never seen before. It's not an opportunity to sell your product to another potential user, which can be really tempting. You want them to love your stuff, you want to sell it up and justify everything that you're doing, but you kind of just want to step back, and if they're bashing on this design this part of the design that you'd spent 40 hours on, then just sort of take it, deal with it, swallow it up a little bit. Because in reality, you kind of want to be like a referee or an umpire in a sports event. You want to be facilitating the thing, but you don't want to be the center of attention. Refs tend to hate being the center. They don't want anybody to know their name, right? They just want to do a good job, keep things flowing, and not get anybody pissed off at them. So you kind of want to be in that role and facilitate and lubricate the situation.
They sometimes say the people who create the product, like the designers and PMs, shouldn't actually be in the room with the actual person who's doing the usability test, because you influence it so much. Because let's say someone starts critiquing it, you're going to see like the visible anger in your face and such. And so, like places like Microsoft, what they do is essentially you have a whole teams doing it that are like away and disconnected from the product team, so you can get real.
In fact, they say that to participants. They say, "I'm not the person who designed it. You can say anything you want," because folks will be, by nature, when we're going around talking to each other a week from today, we're going to be a little hesitant to be like, that's really sucky. Even though you might be thinking to yourself that's not working at all, it's not working for me, you're going to do your best to make them feel good just because of that nature. So, yeah.
So in our case, would you recommend that the teams actually get someone else to read the script and ask the questions and they watch?
Well, the folks on the usability teams at Microsoft, or when I was at LinkedIn or something like that, they spend a lot of time using the product ahead of time, and they really do know it inside and out before they're doing the tests. Because you want the person who's moderating the test to be able to answer straightforward questions about it, and
it'd be tough in this situation. But I mean, one way to do it is like if you have a designer on the team and a dev, let the dev do it. Like let the dev drive versus like having the person who does the product. But,
that's a good strategy too. Because they can at least say, "I didn't design the product."
That guy would dare.
So sticking to the script when you're in a position like we are, when you're kind of scrappy and doing your own testing, can be really hard. So it's really important to, like Ryan and I have been saying, try to separate yourself during this process from what you've been doing and the work that you've been doing and the effort that you've put in, because bringing that to the table in this context is only a negative. In most cases, it's a real positive, but you'll kind of want to curb that for the time being. And so lastly, we'll talk a little bit about the analysis that goes into this. After each test, you're going to talk to one person at a time, presumably, and after they've gone through your tasks and answered your questions, just note the takeaways, and you don't have to spend a boatload of time on it, but write down the 3-5 things that were interesting about that person, and any particular words you heard them say, or something that'll help you remember that later on. If you wait until later on to do that, then you'll have trouble remembering. And in fact, you want that available so that you can sort of adjust your test as the day goes on. Not every test has to be 100% the same. If you give somebody a task and then you realize that this task isn't really good enough to be tested yet, like there's something horribly broken and it's just not going to work because you hadn't seen it that way, then don't worry about testing it. You remove that task from your script and test the other stuff, or zhuzh and adjust it as needed to make it work for the next person.